Pronto, estamos ao vivo, Dan. Tudo bem?
Tudo bem. Boa tarde a todos. Estamos aqui, Daniela e Carol, do Gente Agente, fazer uma breve apresentação sobre nós, enquanto a gente aguarda a Nancy, que vai entrar daqui a pouquinho. Nós somos fundadoras do Gente Agente, nós trabalhamos com formação de alunos mediadores de conflitos, e hoje a gente vai ter a honra de receber a fundadora do Instituto, do CRU Institute, onde nós fizemos a nossa especialização, para falar um pouco com a gente sobre conflitos, sobre violência e sobre Peer Mediation Program. Nós vamos também...
surpresa, né, Dan?
E nós vamos ter uma surpresa também, o Jelani, que foi o nosso head trainer lá no CRU, ele conseguiu aparecer um pouquinho...
também, o Jelani, que foi o nosso...
Eu estou ouvindo o seu...
Pronto, já tirei.
Então, só para falar um pouquinho do CRU, ele já existe há mais de 30 anos, ele formou alunos mediadores em centenas de países, dentro e fora dos Estados Unidos, e nós fizemos um vasto estudo sobre programas de formação de alunos mediadores. É um tema muito sensível, é um tema muito delicado e muito importante, e nós encontramos um caminho muito bacana de construir, de trazer para o Brasil, e daí firmamos essa parceria. Não é isso, Cá? Tá me ouvindo?
É isso mesmo, e quando a gente foi... tá tudo bem, tá tudo funcionando. A gente está esperando a Nancy aqui, a gente já falou com ela já vai entrar. Como a Dani falou, a gente foi até Seattle, a gente fez esse treinamento lá, que foi super legal, mas mais do que isso, a gente criou uma conexão com a Nancy, com a família dela, com todo mundo ali. Foi uma coisa até muito louca pra gente, né, Dan? Porque realmente a gente conviveu com eles, a gente entendeu um pouco da história deles. E isso fez com que a gente tivesse ainda mais uma parceria para trazer esse programa para o Brasil.
Virou uma parceria profissional e pessoal também, né, por um engajamento de ideias, né, de valores com o programa deles e com os princípios da mediação. Eles são mediadores também. Então...
enquanto eles não entram, eu vou já apresentar eles aqui um pouquinho. A Nancy foi fundadora do Instituto, do CRU, foi fundada em 1992, e ela é diretora de lá. Ela que desenvolveu o programa de Peer Mediation e os seus DVDs, que vem todo no kit do treinamento deles. Ela já treinou inúmeras escolas através dos Estados Unidos, do Canadá e Singapura. Ela é mediadora há mais de 30 anos, e trabalha com isso, e é membro da Academia de Mediadores de Família dos Estados Unidos. Ela também é co-chair na seção de educação, e ela já mediou inúmeros divórcios e conduziu inúmeras mediações. Ela é mediadora da Boeing, ela já treinou advogados e profissionais da saúde mental, e nas suas horas off, ela usa as suas skills. Como é, Dani? Me ajuda aí.
Ferramentas.
Ferramentas de mediadora com o marido e a família multicultural de 9 filhos e muitos netos. Ela tem um diploma de Relações Internacionais pela Brown University e um MSW da Universidade de Washington. Então, quando a gente conheceu ela, foi mais um susto, né, que a gente não esperava. A Nancy já é uma senhora, ela tem 9 filhos, que nem eu acabei de ler, 2 biológicos, outros 7 são adotados. E aí é uma mistura, tem negros, tem hispânicos, tem americanos, tem uma que era de descendência filipina. Então, ela tem realmente essa coisa multicultural desde a casa dela, né?
E é o que ela traz para a profissão.
Exato. E o Jelani, que vai entrar junto com a gente, ele foi um adolescente treinado pela Nancy para ser mediador na escola dele. Acho que vale até a pena a gente contar um pouquinho da história dele, né, Dan? Que ele contou que...
ele foi um aluno...
Pode contar.
Não, é que ele foi um aluno, na escola dele teve um programa de formação de alunos mediadores, E na época, não sei porque foi introduzido na escola dele como algo que os pais opinavam, né? Hoje o conceito de formar alunos mediadores é algo que entra muito pela voluntariedade, mas na época que ele fez, tinha essa questão de você ter que assinar um documento dos pais dizendo se ia se formar, se ia poder participar ou não. E na hora que ele mostrou o papel, ele era um garoto que não estava muito afim de participar de formação de alunos mediadores, ele era todo, enfim, de um jeito todo especial de ser, que não queria, né, Cá? Ele falava, se batia o pé com essa questão de não, e a mãe falou, não, você vai fazer, porque isso vai ser muito bom para você entender um pouco o lado do outro, você ser essa pessoa que vai facilitar a comunicação dos outros. E daí, o que aconteceu, ele começou a fazer, e ele realmente se formou, se apaixonou pela profissão, né, de mediação dentro das escolas. Ele foi esse mediador na escola dele, ele está entrando agora aí.
Peraí que eu vou aceitar ele.
Hi, Jelani.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Fine.
We are just talking about you.
About your story.
Can you hear us?
We cannot hear you. Gente, isso seria um típico ruído da comunicação, fala a verdade, Carol. Para quem aqui entende do que a gente fala em treinamento, é isso. Nós temos agora ruído de linguagem, porque nós vamos falar uma outra língua, né? Já falar inglês. A gente tem um ruído aí de
perdoe nossos erros.
Meios tecnológicos, porque a gente tem que falar com uma pessoa que está em Washington, né? E recebendo de outra forma.
Eu acho que o Bobioli está em LA, né? A gente não sabe onde ele está.
Ou em LA, porque ele é de LA.
Can you hear, Jelani?
Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Now
okay,
we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Where are you now?
I'm in LA right now.
Oh, that's nice. We are talking about you and a brief presentation and how we met you in Seattle area last year.
Okay.
And that you were a peer mediation student of Nancy's, right?
Yes.
How long ago it was?
Oh, God.
Okay, let's jump that.
I think that was about 93. 1993 is when I met her. I was being trained as a peer mediator at my school, my high school. And I was one of the people that was selected to be trained. Mm-hmm. And that's how it all started.
And how it was to become a peer mediator? Because in the beginning you were a little bit suspicious.
I was, because of how they announced what the program was going to be. I was a little suspicious because I thought that you would be, friends or buddies with the principal and be getting people in trouble and snitching on people. So I didn't want to do it at first. But my mom looked at it and she's like, oh, yeah, you should do that. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. She said, oh, no, you're going to do that. So I did it, and I found that it was something that I already did in my family. I have 3 siblings, and I was always, I guess you could say I was always the mediator, because I was always trying to figure out ways to not get in trouble and to kind of handle things. I even tried sometimes when my parents would get into an argument, I'd be trying to mediate that. I don't suggest that, but I found that it was something that I already did when I got into the training, and I took a knack for it right away.
That's so nice. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Oh, gosh. Sorry about that. I tried to get on through my computer, and it didn't work. So I don't know what's going on.
No problem. Glad you're here. For you guys to know, we made a little presentation in Portuguese first, and we already say a little bit about you, Nancy, that you're a mediator, and about CRU, how we met, that we went to Seattle area to CRU train last year. And I think we can start, right, Dani? What do you think?
Yes, yes, I think we can start our conversation.
Yeah, we told a little bit about how we met you and your family, Nancy, and that you have the nine kids, and I don't know how many grandchildren.
I lost count, not sure.
We know that. We saw that. And we want to know something about that you dedicate your time, not only your personal issues, but professional too, as mediator, and how it works to you, your skills on your family, and what is the impact of the George Floyd episode on your family and on your community?
That's a lot of questions.
You can choose.
Okay, so I've been a mediator since probably before most of the people listening to this have been born in the 1970s. And I started out doing divorce mediation, and where people are arguing about where their children will live and how much money they're going to get, and it seemed to really work very well. So I started an organization where attorney mediators and mental health people like me, male-female teams, worked with couples who are getting divorced and helped them resolve the issues in a few hours instead of 2 years, or it saved them a lot of time and a lot of money, and it made it better for them to work together around their children's needs in the future. And then out of that organization, we decided that it would be better to work with young children and teach them, and not just young children, but children up through high school, teach them how to use these mediation skills so that they perhaps wouldn't get divorced, or they would have better communication skills. And that's how we started our organization. And we've developed it pretty, really well, where we have a lot of manuals and videos that we've made. But it's not just about solving disputes. It's not just about mediation. Isn't just about, the way we look at it, isn't just about solving disputes. It's actually about helping people understand how other people feel, putting yourself in another person's shoes, recognizing that people have are different from each other, but they need to be respected, and they need to to try to resolve problems together. So that's how this has gotten going. My own family. How did you ask me how it impacted my family?
Yes.
This episode.
Well, actually, I've used mediation with my children as they've grown up. Most of my children are grown. We're raising an 11-year-old granddaughter, but most of them are like in their 30s, 40s, 50s. So when my first batch of children were young, I used to, if they had an argument, I'd say, "Oh, wait a minute, let me go get the spatula," and I'd be holding this thing up in the air, and they'd run away, they wouldn't really resolve the problem, but they'd stop. But in more recent times, when my children have had conflicts, I've helped them sit down and listen to each other and really mediate the dispute. So it's helped me there too.
That's
Did you
perfect.
have some other questions here? I'm not sure.
No.
There was a very
I think that you made all the work throughout the years. Now, and have some episodes like this, they are all ready to deal with it. I mean,
I think so, and I think that because of the fact that my family is very multicultural, so we have children of different races, and in the United States, I know that's very important because it's such a terribly difficult issue that we have personally been struggling with for hundreds of years in this country. And it's interesting that because our family consists of children who are African American, children who are part Asian, children who are Latino, and some children who are Caucasian, they have really learned how to see people as people, and not, oh, that's a Black person, or, oh, it's, and they don't do that. It's really been very helpful, which I think is actually one of the very important things in helping people get along together, is that if you have exposure to a person who is different from you, and that's fine, but you see them as people, not as like, oh, this person may be a criminal, or, because of the way they look, which is just, kind of crazy.
And Nancy and Jelani, how about this George Floyd episode that is so real for all of us, of all of the world, about this? It's happening in the United States. What was the impact on you as mediators, watching all of this happening, and with these movements goes to very pacific manners sometimes, and other times with violent actions? How can we do to transform these moments, to absorb it in the better way?
Well, it was very interesting to see how much, how different this moment is from many times, because George Floyd is not the first to die at the hands of the police. It's happened for many times in many different ways. And it's something that, unfortunately, Black Americans got used to. We shouldn't get used to it, but we're used to it. And it's scary being a, Black man being stopped by the cops, or even calling the cops, because sometimes it doesn't go in your favor. And I've had some really bad experiences. One where there was a situation, my wife at the time was my girlfriend at the time, but I had come home from work and I was backing up and parking. Well, this guy's car was parked right behind my car, and he started saying that I hit his car and was yelling at me and screaming at me and all this kind of stuff. I said, Jennifer, call the police. I called the police. The police started attacking me as if I'm in the wrong, told me I did all this damage to this guy's car. And I said, how could you tell? Oh, there was a little dust that was underneath your car. And there were like 6 cops on the scene. There was no fight, nothing like that. But they called 6 cops, and they issued me a ticket for improper or unsafe backing. I went in and I fought the ticket, and the judge threw the ticket out. He had read something when he was reading it, and it said the ticket was given on the request of Mr. Worley. Mr. Worley was the other guy involved in this no accident kind of thing. And they said, no, never are you supposed to write a ticket on the request of another civilian. That's ridiculous. So they threw it out. But I've had other instances like that. So for us and my family, it's like, oh, finally, maybe people would wake up. Maybe people will wake up and see that Black lives do matter, that it's not okay to be for, Black person be killed by the police and then nothing happened to them. Especially once, a lot of times they've committed no crime. The only crime was being Black in a lot of ways. So it's a promising movement, because this is the first time other races, for the most part, are holding up signs saying Black Lives Matter and really talking about that Black Lives Matter. In other instances where it's happened and they started the whole Black Lives Matter movement, the only people you would see holding signs up were either usually Black or people of color very few Caucasians. And I can just tell you, just from my history, from like age 2 to about 11, I was in a predominantly Caucasian neighborhood. We were like the only Black family there. So I got an understanding of being around different people. And some of my friends, you know, you don't know it until somebody points it out, that especially when you're a little kid, you don't know it until it points it out that you're different. So that's why, and I tend to have much more of a more open mind, even my family per se, with working and talking to people with different backgrounds and different races. So, but you know, the positive part is there is a lot more peaceful protest than there is a lot of violence. Which is good, because that's what's going to move it forward, the peaceful protest. But you have to understand why some people might be upset. And like when they first started looting that Target, they were taking milk and things like that. They weren't taking merchandise. They were taking milk. They were taking food. And it happens in a lot of, you know, poor areas.
Yes. I'd like to say something about that too.
Of course.
I think that the vast majority of the people who have been protesting have been very sincere and very peaceful. They have not created violence, but there have been some people who may really want just the opposite to happen. They want to make these protesters look bad. And, you know, and they have been coming into these protests and creating a lot of trouble. And, you know, and I don't think that most of the people who are protesting so that they can create violence and trouble. The problem with this issue in our country right now, in the United States, is that the administration, and certainly the president, is not a very peaceful person. And there are a lot, and we see this in the people. I'm a clinical social worker, so I'm working with people right now, young people in the schools. You see his attitudes and his feeling that you should put down other people and not be peaceful. Those attitudes are portrayed by people all over our society now.
They don't help.
No, and they feel as though they've been given the green light to go ahead and, you know, do whatever they feel like doing and say things that are so hurtful to so many people. It's really, I think we've, in some ways, you know, we've gone backwards in this country in many ways. But the good news is that many people have been so disgusted by this that when this happened to George Floyd, they were like, this is outrageous. And I mean, it was so graphic. I'm assuming that you've seen the videos.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, we've had other videos before though, of African-American people being murdered. I mean, basically by the police, but it didn't do the same thing. There's something about how bad it's gotten that maybe is going to inspire reform.
Yes.
Here in Brazil, it's quite, sorry, Danny. I'm just going to say that here in Brazil, it's quite the same. The police always, the bad guys are always the bad guys. The black guys are always the bad guys. And we have lots of unnecessary killing and with no reason.
This is something that spread all over the world as well. And
we have one comment. Sorry, we have one comment. Let me see how it works. Tarsila, about Nancy's speech, I believe it's not only seeing people as people, but white people recognizing the privilege they live in and doing the concrete action to end it.
Yeah, it's
people are talking with us.
Well, yeah, and I think that it's the idea of white privilege or of being white is a very interesting phenomena, because when you grow up white in this country, as I did, many people who are white have no idea what people of color are going through. And that was what I was, mentioning about my own family and my children, that they do understand that because they're exposed to people of color within our family. But but what you don't realize, and I've raised white children and I've raised people of color as children, and when you're white, you don't think about race very much. When you're African American, especially, but even Latino or Asian, these people, they think about it all the time. They think about, well, should I go there? I don't know. Maybe something will happen. It's true. But when you're white, you just go do. Everything's okay. and
but that's really true.
Yeah, and I think the difference between most white people in this country and me is that I made a real effort to understand how African American and other minorities feel in this country. And I went to a school that promoted understanding of other people. And I think that's very important. But, most white people don't. But today, it seems as though I'm hoping that they're not just giving lip service to this, that they're really going to be a part of the change. Another thing I want to say too is, I'm going to tell you, just give away, of course, I've already given away my age, but when I was in graduate school, in the 60s, of course, there was a lot of unrest and there was a lot of concern about racism. And I was very interested in getting involved in changing things in this country. But I was told by some of my African American professors at the School of Social Work that I should just butt out, that I shouldn't get involved in it because it wasn't my problem, it was their problem. And it was really interesting. But things have really changed. And now I think that people are realizing that it's not just a black problem. It's not just a white problem. It's everybody's problem. And we really need to work together to solve this.
Yes, Nancy. This George Floyd horrible murder sets up a flame in people all over the world. We are seeing demanding the stop for violence, the stop for labels on people. This appeal, this strong appeal said by George, I can't breathe, seems like a cry for help to people start moving forward in these questions. And so it's very important that people reflect in this moment as parents, as teachers, as chief of organizations, to what to do about it, to not let this moment pass, because we have a very strong power nowadays, and it's something that is spread.
I think that they have to, that we have to be willing to have difficult conversations. See, that's the problem. Part of the problem is nobody wants to have these difficult conversations. They're difficult because you have to realize that some people don't know these things. I think this is the first time that one of these incidents like this, where people saw George Floyd as a person. Oftentimes that's what happened, because there is another case that happened in New York about 5 years ago. There was a gentleman by the name of Eric Garner, and he was in a chokehold. He's being held in a chokehold, and he said the same thing: I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And they killed him. And nothing happened to the cops. They were fired, but they were never brought up on charges. And the thing is that because of this COVID-19 thing, people were at home. People were working from home. People they weren't distracted. They could see this, and they saw it, and they kept seeing it. And it seemed like something happened where, that's somebody, like, that could be my uncle, that could be my brother, that could be my son. Because I saw a sign that was really interesting in one of the protests. A woman, a Caucasian woman, was holding up a sign that said, when George called for his mother, all mothers wanted to answer. And I thought, wow, that's very powerful. But I think the thing is that we have to be willing to have conversations about race and about these prejudice that we have and where they come from and how we can do it. See, in the U.S., our original sin is slavery. Slavery set this whole thing up where, you know, there was a time in the law that a Black person was considered 3/5 of a person.
Oh my God.
And I think that set up that whole idea of that we were less than. And it continued on and has continued on. I mean, it's gotten better in other ways, but really the only major legislation since before now was the Civil Rights Bill. What was that? 1960 what? Like 68, was it 65? Something like that. But anyway, or 64. So you've had that, but we haven't had any other major legislation to deal with racism in this country. And as you can say, what you were saying, it's happening around the world. And I think that's the thing. I think some people think that, you know, the US does start a trend, I think, in the world. It just seems to be that way. And some of those ideas, but I mean, there were ideas that, you know, came from Great Britain too, you know, many years ago, where they were thinking that these people who were darker complected were less than. So I think we have to get around that, but we got to be willing to talk about it.
And people
really
are discussing that right now. You see on the news, people are starting to discuss. They should go further. They might go further, but they are already starting to talk about, to have these difficult conversations, isn't it, Janelle? What do you think about it?
Oh, I think it's good. I think it's good, but it has to continue. It's not a quick one and done.
Yes,
it's definitely got to be action upon.
I think some of the, let me just interrupt here. I think some of the problems that we've seen in schools where we have worked with children and teenagers around racial issues as part of our mediation training is that the schools are afraid to have children discuss it. And that's kind of a generalization, but it's true in many, many schools that they think if you talk about the terrible racial issues and the problems that especially Black people have had in our society, that it's just going to explode. It's going to be like Pandora's box. Everybody's going to, you know, just get up and start fighting each other. And that's just not true. I think that when you're just trying to just put a cap on everything and put a, you know, cover it up and not say anything, I think that's much more insidious than really discussing it. You know, I have another comment too about the question about white privilege. I think that I've heard, and I mean, I've had people who are people of color say to me in a really kind of nasty way, "You have white privilege." Well, I think they're kind of just categorizing everyone who's white as being the same too. And I think that on both sides, we have to realize that people are people. There are bad people who are African American. There are bad people who are white. There are good people who are whatever, you know. And I think that and I think that just because you're white doesn't mean that you have no empathy, that you don't understand what's going on. It's more of a struggle for white people to understand what's going on. That's true. But you have to make yourself get into that struggle.
That's
true. Like empathy and all these techniques of mediation, they can help the society to find a way nowadays. So I think this is a proper moment for that, to bring these techniques to the people. And how can we do this? How can we approach people of these techniques?
I mean, if you have a group that's willing to sit down and they're going to talk it out, one of the techniques in mediation that I think is most important is when you have somebody restate how somebody feels or a situation that they had, or even if somebody said, I'm a white person and I don't really understand. I never have any problems with the police, and I had that another person who might be if you're having these group discussions about race, let's say, and you're facilitating, then I'd have that person say, oh, can you restate what you heard her say? Oh, well, she said she doesn't really understand. She doesn't really have a problem. She's never had an issue with the police and all that. Well, can you tell her from your point of view what's happened to you with the police, and have people restate? Because I think that restating other people's feelings, it allows you to really try to understand them instead of you trying to figure out, well, I wonder how that would feel. You can hear how somebody feels and actually restate in your own words. And then it makes you think, well, wow, that's horrible. I would hate to be in that type of situation. I was talking to someone else, and a talent manager, and she was saying that I was telling her that there's a late night program here, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and one of his writers is an African-American woman. And each night, I think it was that first week all this stuff happened, each night she told stories about her interactions with the police. And I mean, very negative, like guns being drawn on her, different things like that. And she told this, and then she said this thing about, a lot of black people I know all have a story or have stories. And so when I was talking to my talent manager, she said, yeah, and we need to be willing to share those stories. Share those stories with some of your Caucasian friends so they can understand. So much of us have had these stories and we just talk amongst ourselves. We don't really tell anybody else, because to share these stories of our interactions with the police, or when we felt like we were followed in a store and shouldn't be. I remember being 13 and my mom bought me this new jean jacket, and I was wearing it to the store. It was still, back to school time shopping. I was wearing it to the store, and I got separated from my mom. And this salesperson said, "Oh, that's a nice jacket. Where's your receipt?" Are you kidding me? I don't have a tag on it, nothing like that. But she's going to ask me for a receipt as if I stole it, because I shouldn't have it. So we have to be willing to tell some of these stories, and people have to listen and hear. Don't be like, oh, well, that was one incident. Oh, well, that's just an isolated incident. Oh, that's because you were over here. No, hear it and realize it happens more often than you think. And the only way you can do something about it is if you believe me. I mean, this is not the equivalent, but, a lot of times when there's, somebody, the rape victims, they all say, believe the women. You need to believe the women. Well, you need to believe us when we tell you these things that happen to us. And we're not just complaining, we're telling you the truth. And so we can do something about it, that these attitudes do exist, and how do we get rid of it? And we can't get rid of it if nobody talks about it. And I think that's what you were saying too.
I think that the issues that happen with police are really in your face. I mean, they're very blatant. And all police, by the way, I don't think are bad. No. I really don't. I think that there are, but they have a position of power, and some of them have done some really terrible things, especially to people of color. But being Black in this country there are so many things that happen to you that aren't really as blatant as what happened to George Floyd. They're just subtle. They're just little things that people do. I mean, like one of the things Jelani was just discussing about, well, they think you stole something. But just people's attitudes towards my children who are people of color when they were young were very different. There were some people who were like, you got to get that kid out of the bathroom. I mean, when they're in a restaurant, I think he's looking in a box, getting some prizes. I mean, people will say things like that to parents of African-American children, but they would never say that to someone who's a little blonde child. Or they come over and your children are sitting there, and a perfect stranger will come over and start feeling their hair. I mean, because they want to see what it feels like. What in the world is that? You know? And I'm like, wait. And I remember saying this to this white woman, this older woman who was doing this to my daughter. And I said, how would you like me to feel your hair? You really want me to touch your hair? But you see, that's an attitude that a Black child is just there. You know, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. Those kinds of things are really difficult to figure out what you're going to do about it.
Yes, from big to small attitudes, this makes a big difference. And like Janelle said, stories, it's a good way to connect people. Stories, they connect. So if people tells about how does it feels, this will be a result. And I have a tough question here. Can I do it, Carol? A tough question.
I think so.
Okay.
All right.
Do you want me to? I can do it if you want to.
Okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was talking to Danny when we created this agenda, and as mediators, we had a doubt. In this case, as the George Floyd episode, we know as a mediator that we have to always listen to the other side of the story. In this case, do we want to listen to the other side of the story? Or it's such an aggressive thing that there is no reason to listen to the other side of the story? I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, but
yes, yeah.
Can our techniques be applied to this?
Go ahead, Nancy, and then I'll follow you.
Well, I mean, okay. The thing is that, I mean, in a mediation, well, first of all, I mean, this was a murder. So
yeah.
in a mediation, you're trying to help people resolve an issue. And so the issue, I mean, I mean, if you think about it, let's say that George Floyd didn't die, that he was still alive. Would you sit down and mediate between him and this policeman? I would say no, because it's to me that wouldn't be the type of thing that, first of all, probably the power imbalance would be really too high, yes. Too different, and it's I mean what that policeman did was so dangerous. It was a dangerous thing, and you don't want people mediating things where there could be violence involved. However, in general, I think I have curiosity around, why did this policeman do this? Why did he do this? What was going on in his head? You know, how do you develop a person who will do something like that? And I think that that's really the crux of the problem. I mean,
yes, it's important to know this answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's okay to I mean, you would want to hear. I mean, I do think in all cases you do need to hear both sides. Like, I agree with Nancy, it's not something I would mediate. But if it was a situation where, you know, it was in a community, this recently happened. There were some looters at a store, and there was a reporter reporting on the whole thing. And these the people who owned the store were trying to defend their store. And when the police arrived, they started arresting the owners, who happened to be, you know, African American. So they thought, and the reporter's like, no, you missed the looters. The looters went that way. So if it became a situation where, you know, somebody put in a complaint and they wanted to sit down and do a mediation, if they agreed, I think that would be a good situation, because then you could hear people's both points of view, because it wasn't something it wasn't dangerous, but it caused an issue that created a problem. Because I think sometimes some of those things probably could be mediated to try and better the community and the police in that community, the police that serve that community, so they could learn, to get along, just like with, community mediation. Because I do think, and maybe you have to have one mediator that was a police officer and one that was, regular professional mediator to mediate those situations. I think you could do that.
Yeah, to look for solutions together in another, of course, another scenario. But it's a kind of way to use mediations techniques, and to construct solutions. This is the main objective of mediation: to find a solution for both people to resolve their conflicts.
I think if you have people in a joint discussion, if you have people interacting with each other, they're going to start to empathize, or not, but they'll see the other person as a person, not just a member of a class of people that all are the same, or they think that they're all the same, because they're not. And I think that's the important thing. And I know in the United States, there's been, I think, a serious divide between groups of people. I mean, they just don't interact with each other unless they're people like me, So it just doesn't happen, and it should happen more.
Yes. And talking a little bit about the youth, we see in this recent movement, and in another matters like environment issues, the force and the voice of the youth. And this is one of the reasons, I think, with me and Carol from Gente Agente, and you from CRU, believe so much in the power of the youth. So you developed this great program to train peer mediators. And we would like to hear a little bit about this program from you, the results, the experience, something you would like to share with us.
All right.
You want to do that?
Sure, I'll say a few things. I think the experience is very hopeful. And when you're dealing with kids, because the thing is, they haven't had so many life experiences that they become jaded, or they don't, they get stuck in their ways. The amazing thing about when we do mediation, and oftentimes when we're training kids in a school, and someone says, "Oh, I can't believe you have that kid and that kid's being trained. Oh, he's terrible. Like, he's always." The thing that's great about it is it's really empowering to the type of kid like that. And that kid can be like the best mediator, because they have an experience, they have an insight. Nothing worse than someone who's being trained to be a mediator and they've never had an argument, or can't really understand what it means to be in an argument. These kids do. And I think what I find is these kids really, get it right away. They get it right away. And it's something like it just makes sense to them. It's like that makes sense. Well, you would talk about it. Okay. You'd hear different things. And I think it is the first time that, oftentimes with youth, they're not listened to. Nobody listens to me. They don't hear what I say. And when you're in a mediation, sometimes for some of these kids, that's the first time anybody's listened to them and really cared about what they had to say. So I think that's what is maybe that click that works, where people are like, "Ooh, somebody's listening to me, and we're talking, and somebody's teaching me something that's my age, teaching me something that I didn't know." It's funny, but I think a lot of kids, for some time, don't understand the other idea that there's different points of view. It's funny, but a lot of people don't understand that. Nice. Oh, really? So the same thing can happen, and this person can think this way about it, and I can think that way about it. And oh, that's okay. There's not like it's not either or, it's both, which I think is important. And I think that's what I've always liked about mediation. And I think they tend to collaborate more. And I think it's about collaboration. A lot of people think, well, mediation is a lot of compromise. Not always. It's collaborating. It's coming up, working together to solve a common problem. So that's my piece.
Perfect.
Good.
Well, I'd like to say something about the good and the bad, or not bad, but the challenges that we've had in working with schools. And I think that one of the most successful projects that we've ever done was with a high school in a difficult, rather difficult area of Seattle, where we went to that school and we trained every freshman in the school, every ninth grade student, for about 5 or 6 hours. In other words, we went into each language arts class of every freshman, and we did some preliminary mediation training. And then out of those children, the school chose 20 to be further trained to be mediators. We did this for 4 years. So at the 4th year, every student in the school, most every student had some training. The amount of violence in that school, which was quite high when we went in there, was significantly reduced. I mean, it was interesting, and kids all knew about mediation, and they when I'd come into the school, they'd say, "Oh, there's a mediation lady coming in." So
Here comes.
so that was really good. The problem with what we've tried to do is that most schools, number one, don't have the money to do it, and also they don't. It's a struggle. In other words, this is not an easy program to run, and for a school. And I know my husband is always saying, you have to make it more simple. You have to make it more simple. But it isn't simple. I mean, racial issues, understanding culture, understanding other people, resolving conflicts, it's not simple. It takes time and it takes work. And people who are, I don't know what it's like in your country, in Brazil, but in our country, teachers don't get paid a lot. They're overworked. There's just things that they're not doing it. They don't want to do it. And so they'll just start out, and 1 or 2 people in a school will be very excited about the program and they really want to do it. And then they leave and then everything stops. So I don't know how we can help people realize that the struggle is worth it. It really is worth it, and they should try to do it.
Engaging the community is very important. That is what you're saying now. We have to,
Yes.
We need a school that engage and bring this knowledge, that it's willing to change the culture.
Exactly. But that doesn't happen overnight,
And they have to be understanding.
Like that.
And it's like planting seeds. By doing this, it's really planting seeds. And that really, and we tell people, the goal of the program is not necessarily to solve all the problems in the school or reduce the number of suspensions. It's about teaching kids to use these skills to be their own mediators. Because the more they understand about being respectful and talking to each other and working things out rather than fighting, the more they'll start to do this on a daily basis and start interacting, and you have less problems. You might have less problems that get to you, get to the principal, because they're handling it on their own. And, to go back to what Nancy says about, make it easier. You can't make it easier. One, and this is the thing I respect about it, is that the way we train and the materials we use are the same materials and techniques that you use as an adult mediator, which to me, is the way it should be. It shouldn't be dumbed down for kids. I mean, it's a little bit simpler in elementary, but they're dealing with different types of problems. When you're getting in middle school and high school, those problems get pretty bad, especially socially. And now you've got the advent of social media, which creates a whole nother issue. So yeah, I mean, I wish we could make it easier, but there's no way. There's no way in order for it to work effectively and not be some, kiddie thing that you never would use if you're not in school. There's people that, other than just myself, that Nancy has talked to who've been trained in mediation, and they were like, "Oh, I remember when I was a kid and I was trained in mediation, and how great it was, and how I want to do more of this."
When we have some positive experience, you want more. You want to make part of the new culture. You want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Nancy, you just said that you train all the freshmen at a high school. We know teaching teenagers is really difficult to get their attention. Now with cell phones and social media, we get that it's really difficult to get their attention. But one thing at your program that we love is the experience they have during the program, the interaction, the role plays. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you make that to make it an experience?
Oh, she can't hear you.
She can hear me?
You can't hear Nancy?
Hi, Nancy.
No? Let me see. Let's see. Now you can hear us?
Can you hear Nancy? Anything? No?
No.
Okay.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
We can hear you.
You're good.
She just can't hear you. Let's see. Well, I'll just say, I'll answer this a little bit. Basically, the role plays are started writing role plays from different scenarios, some that actually happen in schools, and we write the role plays. And the way Nancy developed it is to have a little description of what is going on in the dispute, and then she would write one character's information on one page and the other characters on another page, and then we separate them, and then we'll do the role play. And the great thing about the role plays is it gives them experience with dealing with these disputes and trying out the techniques. And we don't want it word for word because it doesn't work, because all they're doing is reading a script instead of them coming up with ideas and things that, maybe somebody would really come up in a dispute. But it gives a chance for the participants to, one, be a disputant, but also be a mediator, be an observer, and they can learn from all those are learning positions. They're all learning positions.
By experience.
Yeah.
Practice.
Yes. And we like to use the name tags because sometimes it allows you not to feel like you're being yourself. You're being someone else at that particular time, which is a great thing. And the thing about it, and I think this is why we do it pretty well with, working in schools and with young people, is that our training is very interactive. And when your training is different from teaching, when you're teaching, you have certain things that you need to get through and you're going through, and you can take your time and you can kind of maneuver and do different things. And you're teaching till you get it. When you're training, it's like you get in and you get out. You got to be quick and you got to keep their attention and then get out and come back in. And I think that's the important part of it, being interactive. It gets kids up and moving around. They're not just stuck like being lectured to.
It's very fun. It's funny. It's a funny time. We had a lot of fun, me and Carol, when we did our specialization with you, with both of you. It was very fun. And kids love it.
Yeah, that's what kids will say oftentimes. My favorite part is the role plays.
They love to do the role plays.
And they go into the character. It's so funny. Sometimes they even it's not easy to mediate because they get so much on the roll and say, come on,
Right.
let's.
Yeah, they do. They
as
get very much
adults, we
into
want
it.
to collaborate, but the kids, they stuck into the character.
But it's good because you need to be able to know kind of, okay, what's going to happen when you're in a real situation instead of just being
Yes,
stuck in there.
yes, that's it. Can you hear us now, Nancy?
Nancy.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm having to do this on my cell phone. So
No problem.
Perfect.
I asked Jelani and you the difficulty to train teenagers to get the attention with cell phones and social medias, and they don't want to talk with boring adults. And we said that your program is it's about experience the mediation techniques with the role plays and everything. And Jelani just told us that the role plays is the best party because it makes them really experience the thing as a mediator, as a part, as an observer, and how you came with this, with this program.
how did we come up with the role plays?
Not just the role plays, but with the interactive of the program.
Well, we took as Jelani said, we took the techniques and the approaches that we were using to train attorneys and mental health professionals, and we made it more exciting and more interesting and more appropriate for young people. So we do a lot of we just made up these skits that we do. I mean, I made a lot of them. To try to illustrate these techniques, because you can't stand around talking blah, 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 blah to kids. I mean, they're not going to listen to you. After about 5 minutes, they're like, and I mean, it's good and bad, again, because it's great. The kids, I don't think I've ever done a training, and we've done hundreds of trainings. I don't think I've ever done a training where the students didn't like it. That they are all engaged. They really liked it. The problem is that the training that we've created is difficult. It's hard to do it because you have to be kind of an actor. You have to not be afraid to kind of show off with kids and interact with them and just let down your hair, really. And if you're that kind of person, it's fine. If you're not, it's really a problem. And we've gone through many trainers that they're standing there looking at the book and trying to read the book, and you can't train kids like that. You have to just be present. So I don't know what you mean exactly by how we came across these techniques, but we just tried them out over the years, and we changed things also as we went along. But the role plays that we made are almost all examples from what we've heard from students, from kids. Oh, this is a problem we have at our school. Well, what happened? Well, this girl called this other girl a name, and then this other girl started getting mad and going to beat her up after school. And that's so we created those things around what students have told us to do. And the other thing is, some mediation programs, I know I've seen them have like 5 or 6 role plays in a manual. I mean, I think we have 60 or 70. I don't know. We
something
have
like that.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And they're not all appropriate. None of them are appropriate for every school, because we train different. We've trained all over the US and in some other countries too. And, you have to adjust yourself.
Yes. Perfect.
For us to get to the end, we have some questions for you guys. This one: how does mediation collaborate or impact on the ethical relationships in schools?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that question means. I know that mediation has in schools where it's successful, it becomes a part of the policy of the school. That mediation is used when there's a conflict. It's assigned to mediators, usually by a counselor or maybe an assistant principal, as part of the process that occurs in the school. there are parameters also upon which mediations are assigned. In other words, if there's violence and there's potential violence, you probably wouldn't assign it to peer mediators. But you know, the school develops a policy, and it should, and the ethics of it are that disputes need to be resolved amicably, need to be resolved and talked out, and people need to understand these things rather than just suspending people every time. Or, you know, that doesn't do anything except they cool off and they come back and they're the same as they were before, really.
Yes.
And oftentimes, and the school has to, the entire faculty need to know about it in the school. The principal has to be behind it and support the program. And that's, you know, one way to have that relationship with the school and the mediation program. And then also that, you know, that the school can be able to set those parameters. I think that's important too, because if the principal says, well, there's certain things that I do not want to go to a mediation, you need to honor that. But you also have to be able to clarify what things really more likely than not would be in mediation. What types of disputes would you do? So if somebody brought a gun to school, that's something you wouldn't mediate, you know. But if it's possible,
schools,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, schools develop their own, you know, ideas as to what they really want to mediate and what they think is inappropriate. And what I know, we've had schools that said, well, if you ever say a swear word, you can't mediate. Well, then they would complain that they weren't getting any mediation referrals, you know. So you have to be a bit flexible. But there are some things like, for example, like sexual harassment, which in some areas of our country anyway, you have to report that to the authorities, and schools don't want you to mediate those things.
Of course. Do you have time for one more question, Dani, or you think it's...
I think we have time for one more question. Now we exceed 7 minutes. 1 hour and 7 minutes talking here.
Oh my goodness.
Great.
The last one. How can we educate our children and young adults using nonviolent communication tools to help them mediate racial issues? Anyone has a clue on that?
Well, I think one thing for sure to educate, you know, about nonviolent communication is to be able to be willing to talk about feelings, but also that you really have to listen to people too. And you have to respect people's feelings. That's important. You have to respect people's feelings. But then you also not have to, it's hard, but you got to be careful about judging someone who says something that you may not agree with. And you did, but you got to be willing to educate. And that takes a lot. I think sometimes children are better at it than adults, for sure. They're better at challenging those things because there have been, because as you know, part of our mediation training is we have a diversity discussion. And there have been some things that kids have said that have been really upsetting. And you have to allow for that. And one of the things that we say is, hey, this is a safe place. We're all going to talk. We're all going to be respectful of each other, and we're going to listen. And we're going to be, you know, and you have to really, if the adult is doing it, then you've got to really facilitate that. And you have to listen and make sure that, you know, if something gets a little too heated, you got to stop it. And you got to turn it around. And some of that can be done with restating, and some of it can be done by maybe you restate what's going on and talk about it.
I have some ideas on that too. I think that the tools that we teach students or anyone to use in mediation would be the same tools that you would use in a racial dispute. I mean, I don't think that that's a different thing, that, you know, you have to use different tools. The one thing I think is very important about mediating racial disputes is that you assign mediators who would complement, would be the same race as the people in the dispute. So if you have, let's say, a Caucasian person and an African American person or African Brazilian person, I don't know what you say down there, that if you have those two people in a dispute, you wouldn't want to have two Caucasian mediators. So we usually have two mediators in all of our school disputes, and I think that's very important to have them at least reflect the differences in the disputants.
Yes.
Just one question, very quick to end, because it's important. Mediation should be taught to students or to start with the teachers?
Well, I know in our program, we like to do an overview of the program with the teachers, mainly to just try to hook them to realize what this is. Because I think most schools, at least here, they think that they object to mediation because they think that children are going to just be out of control and running in out of their classrooms all the time, and that the mediators will be like what we call arbitrators or judges, that the students are going to be bossing the other kids around, telling them what to do. So I like the idea of doing some training with the teachers, possibly before you train the students, but not train all the teachers. I think that would be tough. It would be difficult to train everybody in the school. Some people do that. But the mediation should be done in a school by the peers, by the students, if possible. We've had some problems in schools where we've trained counselors and faculty, and then they've decided, it's just easier to do it myself than to bring in the students. It's harder to do it that way. Well, if you don't have the students mediating, you've lost the whole point of the program.
Of course.
So everyone needs to really have some idea of what this is. And I think
what's going on.
I want to say one other thing is that our program now starts with preschool and up to second grade through animal stories. So even, in a district where you have, many different levels of schools, ideally, it would be great if you could introduce even very young children to these concepts.
That's amazing.
And the more that people know and the teachers know, the more support you can have for the program. And then it becomes a common thing within the school. As Nancy was talking about that high school where we trained all the ninth graders, it became very common what mediation was to most of the teachers and the students. And I think that's why it works so well, because everybody knew about it.
It's a perfect scenario. It's like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. No, that's perfect.
We are really struggling here to speak English after a long time.
Our first live in English, it was woo.
I think
you guys did great.
You're doing wonderfully.
Thank
wish
you.
I could speak Portuguese.
Very nice. The next one, we can speak in Portuguese.
Oh my God. It will be me and you talking, Danny. Thank you very much for joining us here today. It was really nice, this talk with Eleven. It's going to be on our YouTube if you want to share later or something. And thank you everyone that is watching us. I'm going to do a little bit announcement em português, just um second. Gente, quinta-feira que vem, a meio-dia, de novo, a gente vai fazer agora um outro encontro com alguns adolescentes que a gente já treinou no Lar Síria, numa instituição que a gente fez o programa do CRU, Informar Alunos Mediadores. Então, quinta-feira que vem, meio-dia, a gente está aqui com 3 adolescentes que já são mediadores dentro do Lar Síria. I was saying that... sorry.
Só vou terminar aqui em português a minha... Eu queria agradecer a todo mundo também e me desculpar, porque eu acho que nós não conseguimos ler todas as perguntas, porque realmente eram muitos fatores hoje para a primeira live em inglês, né, Cá? Mas a gente vai pegando. Sim, sim. Então é isso, tá? Pode wrap up.
There's another comment that we couldn't read because we changed the subject and we didn't want to come back again. But that's it. Thank you very much, Nancy.
Well, thank you
It's really nice to see you guys again. We miss you.
Right, good
Thank you
seeing
very
you.
much. Thank you,
Thank you,
Jelani.
guys.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right.
Bye-bye. Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you too.